Shapeshifters Season 2! 2!
Want
to clap it? Want to clap it?
There you go.
There we
See?
go.
Everybody,
welcome.
We got a new producer
Let's
director.
welcome everybody first. This is our second season of Shaped Shorts.
Yeah.
Right. And introduce myself, Tony Bertucco, and this is Stu Barr. You probably recognize us or don't want to recognize
Tony's
us.
picture's in a lot of post offices, so I'm sure you don't have any problem seeing his picture.
Stu Barr is usually seen running down the street. In any case, welcome back. We should introduce our
we got a new producer
director.
David S. Reynolds.
And S. Wait. David S. Reynolds?
Yeah, that stands for Sparky.
Sparky.
We got
welcome,
Sparky.
Thank you,
Sparky.
Sparky Reynolds. we're in for it now, I think.
I know. He told us. Well, remember he was getting a little antsy and we said we could fire him. He said, "No, I don't think so. I'm not going anywhere. You guys could fire. He couldn't fire us."
Exactly. Anyway, welcome back.
Talent is always replaceable.
Is art replaceable?
Well, that's for another shape.
Yes,
I'll tell you, that's a Shape Shorts episode.
Right there. Is the artist replaceable?
Well, we should introduce our season one premiere episode
season
1.
Two.
Season 2 episode.
Hard counting?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, Sparky does this to us when he does this. I have to get used to it.
Which one of you has the math degree?
Welcome again, everybody. This is Stu Barr with Shapeshifters. This is episode 2, and we're still talking about the Iliad, but we're not really going to go into the Iliad yet. We're going to go into something that started in the 19th century, actually. In the 19th century in Europe, people began to look at all their ancient literature, Europeans, and the thing came up, what I brought up, is it really true? Is it historically true? And they began to think, first started off with biblical archaeology. Are things in the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, where things are brought up and mentioned, did they actually happen? Are there the places exist? Things like this. Now, I'm not going to go into biblical archaeology, but by the 1870s, this was going into the next piece of Western literature that was extremely important to Westerners, the Trojan War. Was there a Trojan War? And more importantly, was there any city of Troy? Did the cities of Mycenae, etc., exist? Was any of that real? Is it all a figment of Homer's imagination? Well, it came up in the history of this period. Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire under Turkey. Greece had gotten its independence from the Ottoman Empire, become a separate state. And a lot of Greeks they want to know their history. They already know they're one of the most ancient civilizations in the Western world. So what is it that they're? Now, interestingly enough, a lot of this archaeology comes out of Germany. A man named Heinrich Schliemann, from the time he was a little kid, was obsessed with Homer, with the Trojan War. Did it actually happen? Was there a war in there? Was a war 10 years? Was anything here real? Or is it a figment of an imagination over 500 or 600 years? Did anything actually happen? Well, he decides to go down to Greece. He's not an archaeologist. He's not a professional in anything in there. In fact, he really doesn't know how to do a dig or anything else. He's obsessed with Troy. He's obsessed with the whole story. That's it. So, one of the first things he decides to do, if you're going to look for Troy, you've got a lot of information from Rome that the city of Ilium is the city of Troy. And the Romans had identified it and said that city had been built on top of the Trojan story. So he decides to go down to Greece and crosses over into Turkey. Well, he uses Homer and other parts of the Greek epic where they actually describe how many footsteps or lengths from the ocean all the way up to the gates of Troy. Well, that should be fairly easy to find. So he goes through there. Now, to be honest, he's a lousy archaeologist. Anybody in archaeology today, when you start a dig, everything there is saved. You don't know what it is. he digs right through stuff. He doesn't know what it is. He's going to look for that. He wants to see if he can find the entrance to the city of Troy, the Trojan Gate that's described by Homer numerous times. He wants to know if that's actually real. And he digs where he thinks it is. Well, in the meantime, he probably does a lot of damage to archaeology. And what he does find is a city that doesn't match anything that Homer says. Nothing matches. If that's your life, that, shall we say, is a tad disappointing. You've worked on this. Now, by the way, he made money. He's a businessman. He's using his own money. We're not talking government grants. We're not talking someone collecting money. We're not talking any of that. We are talking about someone who is using his own money. Well, obviously that's not infinite. What are you going to do when you find your city isn't there? Does that mean the story is wrong? Or what would you do? Now, I'm asking all of you out there. I want you to think about that for a minute. What would you do if this is your life? You have dedicated and what you find doesn't match anything. Do you give up and go home and say, I was defeated? Well, if you're Schliemann, no, you don't give up. You don't give up at all because although he has no training, he asks the question, well, if the city of Troy is wrong, the city of Agamemnon, Mycenae, let's see if that's right. Maybe the whole thing is wrong. So they start digs that would later be completed much later. One of the things described in Homer is the Lion Gate. The Lion Gate is a thing that you see a shape that goes like this, and then comes out like this. The gate sits here. What it does, it makes it defensible for anybody coming in to try to get to the gate. They get bombarded with oil, fire, everything else. It's a narrow passageway. The Lion Gate is often considered the first European coat of arms. So he puts that up. He digs and he finds it. He finds the Lion Gate, almost described exactly by Homer. And he finds the city of Mycenae. He finds the cistern as described. Seems to be right. He finds what was often, what he interprets, not necessarily what would happen, as the tomb of Agamemnon. When he finds that, he thinks he's gotten something here. He goes to some of the other Greek cities and they all match. Well, why doesn't Troy match? Now, if I'm Homer, if I'm Schliemann, I look around and go, God, Troy doesn't match. What's the first thing that's going to occur to me? You know what? I'm going to say they're Greeks. They exaggerated the size of the city. That's what they probably did. But the problem is, Homer isn't always very nice to the Greeks. When someone reads the Iliad, Agamemnon's not exactly your nicest guy around. To be blunt, he's an ass. Agamemnon is an ass. That's what he is. And so I read that and I go, well, he is Greek, but he doesn't really give them the best thing here. In the next episode, we're going to read the introduction. The introduction to Homer, to the Iliad, is from a Greek. It's not really nice to them. It's kind of bad. So, once again, things aren't adding up. Now, Schliemann will give a lot of his stuff to the Antiquities Museum in Athens. He's not an archaeologist looking to sell treasures and stuff like this. He will look for this. Now, one of the things that's an archaeological mystery until the end of World War II, what were called the Jewels of Helen. There's pictures of Schliemann with his girlfriend with the jewels, what are called the Jewels of Helen on her, that he found in one of the digs. Lo and behold, those jewels disappear. Gone. Where'd they go? Well, people say Schliemann sold them. But that doesn't add up because he had found a lot of stuff more valuable than that and he didn't sell. He gave it away. What happened to the jewels? Well, that would remain a mystery until the end of World War II. At the end of World War II, the jewels would ultimately have been found in St. Petersburg, making their way through to Germany. Well, from Germany probably to St. Petersburg at the end of World War II. What happened to them there? Where did they go? Well, once they're found in St. Petersburg, okay, this is in the 1980s, the collapse of the Greeks obviously want them back. You have the normal national who gets the treasures from the city. The British are fighting with the Greeks now over the Elgin marbles that were on the Parthenon, but that's another story. We won't go into that right now. But so the story comes up in there. Where did these jewels come from? Now, they eventually end up back in Greece. Time goes by. Schliemann dies, never finding the city of Troy. Everything he does matches but that. Well, by the time he dies, it's World War I coming on. Turkey signs on, or the Ottoman Empire, what's left of it, which would become Turkey in 1922. What's left of the Ottoman Empire allies itself with Germany. And in World War I, one of the most disastrous battles for the Allies, the British, the Battle of Gallipoli, occurs on the foot of Troy. Who knows how much is destroyed? We don't know. But obviously one thing's happening, no archaeological digging going on. The interwar years, the Western world loses interest. We don't care anymore about Troy. It's another story. After World War II, no big deal. It isn't until the 1970s that people start to say, wait a minute, remember what that guy was digging? Be kind of nice to see what he did. Let's go back and see what he found. He never did found Troy. What's the problem here? Well, he goes out. Some students start digging, and before you know it, they start to dig around. And what they see is what in modern archaeologists, you see the settlement in Ilium and Troy is many, many different levels of settlement. How do I date a settlement? Okay, what is it? How do I date it? Well, there's many ways. I'm not going to go into archaeology on how to date it, but I can date it by pottery styles. I date it by composition of the pottery. How was it made? I'm not an archaeologist, so if you're really, really interested, talk to a real archaeologist, not Stu Barr, but we'll go somewhere else on that later. Anyway, they start to find out the city they found doesn't match the dates. I find the cities of Mycenae, they're from 1300, 1200 BC, but these cities don't come anywhere close to those dates. Eventually, they begin to find layers of cities, and one of the amazing mysteries here was one of them, they dig down through a city and they find some pottery shard that it's a lower level than it should be. In other words, it's illustrated as older. Well, it's a great mystery until actually a wildlife biologist comes along, and the biologist says, well, what you got that pottery at too low a level. Do you want to know why it's probably there? Look around the ground. You guys all think only humans move stuff. Animals move it. Squirrels move it. That was probably dragged from somewhere else to a lower level. Turns out to be true. Now, without going into any more of this, they eventually find a city that matches Troy. The problem becomes that city that matches Troy appears to have disappeared somewhere between 1500 to 1400 BC. The city that matches Agamemnon is 1300 BC. The dates don't match. And this will eventually go back to the last episode I just said. The people who write this are not historians. The dates and times, Homer's not sitting there going, well, I found this piece of pottery that's a little off. The times don't add up, so I better check it out. He doesn't care. There's no history. One other thing, before I get much more into the history, ask yourselves this, even as you sitting out there. You all study history. You all have family members. How much do you know about your great-great-great-grandmother? What was her favorite color? What did she sing? You know nothing. You have no history. She has disappeared into the mists of time. You go on Ancestry.com and look out where she came from. That didn't tell you anything. Even today, we still live in a world, for most of us individually, history disappears by the fourth generation. Certainly by the eighth or ninth, it's gone in our own families. So it's not hard to understand the Homer who did this. Archaeology, though, would gradually add up to what I did in the last session. We're seeing there's no history. We're seeing, though, that it tells a story. And the better mystery is we see a guy accurately describing it, because they will eventually find a city of Troy that matches pretty much Homer. And, sad tale of all, Schliemann dug right through the main gate he was trying to save in his thing. So we have a whole story of this, of the history in there. But how did Homer get so much right about geography, so much right about this? By the way, as a little side note, how did Schliemann get the gates wrong? He assumed ocean levels don't change. He assumed sea coasts have been the same for 2,500 to 3,000 years. They're not. If you go back and see where it is, you get it right. So we sit there and see archaeology doing it. I don't have an answer for the question of how did Homer get the geography correct, get the descriptions of the cities correct, and get the time all wrong. That is a whole nother lecture on what we mean by history. In order to understand history, my compadre here, Tony, will talk about time sometime, we don't know when. But do we really have a concept of time to match to our concept of history? Obviously, they did, and for the most part, didn't care, because it doesn't matter to the length of the story. It simply isn't an issue. You don't need to know precisely the dates. You're not going to take a high school history class in Homer's world and ask you, when was Troy? Well, that was in 1322 BC in January. You don't worry about that kind of stuff. This is what makes the story interesting. This is what changes how we view this. Anyway, thank you again, and see you for the next episode. Well, Tony, how do you think the I-6 fit into this, you as a listener?
I liked it a lot. I thought that in episode 2, you actually went into the latter portion of the I-6. And let's again review them just for the audience, and that is to animate, originate, rejuvenate, stimulate, deus ex machina, and to tell the story. And in this particular episode, what I saw when I was talking to some of the students afterwards was you did a lot of rejuvenation and mostly tell the story. Mm-hmm. And in rejuvenation, and again, review rejuvenation is to actually bring life back in to the classroom. The archaeological bibliography, bringing in archaeology, connecting science into humanities through Achilles is, I think, things that is missing. And you talked about digging for Troy. And what is this really? What is its history? What is its history?
Is there any history?
Is there any history?
Maybe
exactly. And
does history even exist?
So these are the questions that really do rejuvenate a classroom in this sense. Stimulate how to bring these connections, and an excellent job on that. Was there really a Trojan War?
Yeah.
Get the student involved in asking that kind of a question, because what do we know about history? You ask any person today of 100 years ago, wars were going on.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
No.
They have heard stories of the wars, but we don't really know what they saw, what they felt, and so on. So you also brought in the idea of the Lion Gate in Mycenae, and how that was so significant.
Accurately described.
Absolutely described. Fascinating. That was the case. Matching Troy with Mycenae. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a fascinating story in itself. You and I have been there.
Yeah.
We actually have gone there. We've taken students to these sites, and to have the students see that, it's amazing, because we try to bring that experience back to the classroom.
Well, you try to bring it back. I remember we went there.
Yeah.
We made him walk under the Lion Gate and asked him, did Agamemnon actually walk under this on his way to?
And then we used to,
before he left for Troy.
You used to tease me about this, that I'd take a bunch of the students and go over and I'd say, now put your ear to the wall and listen carefully. Can you hear Agamemnon speak? Of course, you'd be laughing and say, don't listen to him, don't listen to him.
And I'd say, Tony hears a lot of things, so just say yes.
But I thought also in this episode, you brought a lot about deus ex machina, which is kind of the hardest one to describe in the I-6, because it does mean to bring in unorthodox examples of solution. And that's what the deus ex machina means, is God out of the machine. And it fixes things, that God fixes things that seem to be unfixable. Schliemann uses his own money. You mentioned that. Probably students didn't even know that. To do real accurate science, you always think about funding and some organization, grants and National Science Foundation and so on.
You're really dedicated to the science when you're using
your own money. You're dedicated to it. You have a goal in mind, and it's an intellectual one. How to find Troy? He brought that up. Did he really know where to go?
Yeah.
He goes to Homer to find Troy, not to anyone else. Everybody else had tried it. Go to the original source.
Yeah. See where he said it.
Exactly.
Is he right?
Is he right? And then also a problem. Was it really Troy? Mm-hmm. How many cities of Troy were there? What levels were they? And then the great point that you bring up was the Greeks exaggerate size. And does that destroy map making? And think about where we'd be today if GPS were working on false map sizes. Yeah. So deus machina comes out very clear. Tell the story is the story. and you did a lot of that. Looking for Troy, compare Troy with Mycenae. What were their differences, and how can you tell? I think you mentioned, is this really the city of Troy? Well, what did the Mycenaeans do?
Well, and is it the city of Troy of Homer, or
Exactly.
is it another city?
Is it another city? Exactly.
You don't. How do you do that?
And then you brought a contemporary part of St. Petersburg
Yeah.
in terms of
Jewels of Helen.
the Jewels of Helen, exactly. Gallipoli.
Yeah.
All those things are very relevant. And the 1970s.
Yeah, Gallipoli always fascinating. Bringing it to the modern world is, here you are at Battle of Troy. Let's assume there was something.
Right.
It's a big deal. And in the 20th century, at the foot of Troy, you fight over the same thing again.
All over again.
It's
Exactly.
amazing. And
Exactly.
for the English, it's a disaster, but
But also, and tell the story, the notion about the pottery was fascinating. You know, the idea that you can actually look at the pottery. We do that a lot today.
Yeah.
In more current archaeology, archaeology in the Southwest, it's shards and so on, and we go learn a lot. Greek pottery, you know, classic Greek pottery, not ancient Greek pottery,
Yeah.
because we're talking about Troy now. What's
ancient.
Ancient versus 500 BC Greece.
and the science. Pottery's made out of dirt. What if I find a piece of pottery that doesn't match the dirt?
Exactly. And
I have a problem here.
By the way, we should tell the audience too, archaeology wasn't even there at
No.
the time.
Mhm.
Schillerman begins archaeology.
Yeah.
So, most important, fascinating I heard when I listened to you about tell the story was, why was it, why did the war even occur?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then that would get us directly into episode 3.
Right.
So, thank you.
And you.